and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee-Jun in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. Despite stronger exports, Korea's recovery momentum may be slowing down on decelerating growth in manufacturing output and sluggish private consumption. There are mounting concerns over ballooning global debt, mainly driven by emerging markets, but U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen thinks there will be no financial crisis within our lifetime. We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. A report by a government think tank showed although the Korean economy is on a recovery path, thanks to growing semiconductor exports and machinery investments, it may be losing its momentum. Our Kim Ji-yeon tells us why.
Although the engine for growth for Asia's fourth largest economy has improved in recent months, it may not be enough to maintain the recovery's momentum. That's according to a report released by the Korea Development Institute on Thursday that shows there are several other factors causing the slowdown in the economic recovery. This includes a fall in the rate of increase for outputs in the first half of 2017 compared to the end of the previous year, with shipments in the mining and manufacturing sectors being sluggish since March this year. The slowdown is also partly due to low levels of private consumption, signaling that the country's export-based growth is somewhat limited, unable to boost domestic consumption. There was just a 1.6% increase in retail sales in May, a near 1 percentage point drop from the previous month. Employment figures are not so encouraging either, as the number of people newly employed in the services sector dropped on month from 424,000 employees in April to 375,000 in May. The report says the poor consumption and employment figures are mainly due to a slowing increase in production in the services sector, which fell by 0.4 percentage points from the previous month to 2.1% in May. In particular, industries engaged in food and lodging fell by more than 3% since they started to spiral down from the second half of last year. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
Despite a strong start to the year, Korea's shipbuilding industry lost its hold on the top spot in global ranking, falling behind China. According to the UK-based industry tracker Clarkson Research, Korean shipbuilders won orders worth 2.38 million compensated gross tons in the first half of this year. That is still double the amount of orders sealed during the same period last year. However, after winning a deal in May to build 4 LNG carriers, China's total orders came to 2.9 million CGT, just enough to knock Korea off the top spot. Hyundai Heavy Industries and other Korean shipyards have clinched record orders on increasing demand for large oil tankers and LNG carriers, with more orders expected later this year. The National Assembly's Budget Committee has failed to conduct a review on the government's roughly $10 billion supplementary budget bill. The initial plan was for rival parties to deliberate over the bill, aimed at creating more jobs at 13 relevant Assembly committees, and for their reviews to the Budget Committee. However, that process has been stalled, notably at committees chaired by the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, after it refused to review the bill, claiming it doesn't meet legal requirements. Although the National Assembly Speaker has the power to submit the bill for review at the Budget Committee, even if relevant committees haven't completed their reviews, he said he wants all parties to be on board. Opposition parties boycotted the meeting to protest the appointment of the new education minister. Korea's birth rate has seen a steady decline over the past 2 decades, and concerns are now rising over a possible slump in domestic demand if there is a sudden drop in the population of children and adolescents. Our Elliot Kim has more.
In 1980, there were 700,000 new births in Korea, a number that seems unattainable nowadays, with this year's birth totals expected to reach only 300,000. The number of primary and secondary school students peaked in 1980 at 9.82 million and has since tumbled to 5.88 million in 2016. 2030 estimates sit at only 5.2 million. With consistently low birth rates, domestic industries are fearing the worst. As the number of newborn babies decreased, only 10,700 tons of milk powder was sold this year, compared to 27,380 tons in 1992. Other industries are suffering in the same vein. Piano sales have plunged from 187,000 in 1992 to just 3,600 last year. Children's clothing companies are now expanding into the adult segment of the market, including business wear. Businesses targeting children like confectionery companies and theme parks have seen sharp sales drops. With infants and young people playing such an important consumer role in the local economy, experts say that if the birth rate stabilizes at current low levels, domestic industries may fall into a long-term slump. Analysis of Japan's 20-year recession underscores declining fertility rate as a major factor, with the resulting population drop triggering sluggish consumption. Japan was eventually able to turn their fortunes around on the back of strong overseas exports, but with the potential for Korea to suffer declining exports and birth rates simultaneously, experts worry that if the crisis is not avoided early on, the low birth rate could weigh on the country's long-term economic prospects. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has expressed concern that loose monetary policy could pose a threat to financial stability. Several policymakers at the Fed have called for a reduction in the central bank's massive bond holdings, although they remain divided on when the drawdown should begin. According to minutes from the Fed's June meeting, the U.S. Central Bank also appeared determined to further raise rates after a 0.25% hike last month. Fed officials were generally confident that a balance sheet runoff could be conducted with minimum disruptions to markets, despite disagreements over its timing. The Federal Reserve also brushed off concerns over muted inflation levels, which they view as temporary and likely to reach its target goal of 2% in the long run. Japan and the European Union have agreed in principle on a new free trade deal. It's seen as an open challenge to the protectionist policies being adopted by the Trump administration in the U.S. Our Eunice Kim has the details.
Global trade has come under threat in light of U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called America First policies and a few other countries taking on economic nationalism. But this broad deal between Japan and the EU seeks to buck such trends and could potentially be the EU's largest FTA, accounting for more than a quarter of global economic output. EU Trade Commissioner Cecilia Malmström said in a tweet after discussions with Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida on Wednesday that a political agreement was reached and that leaders of both sides are set to confirm it. Kishida said both sides needed to keep flying the flag of free trade. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and EU Council President Donald Tusk are set to endorse the pact on Thursday in Brussels, the day before the G20 summit opens in Germany. But it will take several months for both sides to sign the deal, as all the terms are yet to be finalized. Sources say the deal is good news for European farmers, as Japan will open up dairy imports, especially cheese, from Europe over the course of 15 years. This has been one of the main sticking points during nearly 4 years of talks between the two economies, as Tokyo has been fairly protective of its local dairy market. The FTA would also scrap the EU's 10% tariff barrier on Japanese cars over a 7-year period. Overall, 99% of goods traded between Japan and the EU will have tariffs removed, although in some cases it could take years to take effect. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen thinks there won't be another financial crisis in our lifetime. Now, despite her optimistic view of the global economy, recent data showed that global debt reached a record level in the first quarter of this year. Take a look.
Would I say there will never, ever be another financial crisis? Probably that would be going too far, but I do think we're much safer, and I hope that it will not be in our lifetimes, and I don't believe it will be.
Speaking at an exchange in London, U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen said the central bank has learned its lessons from the financial crisis and subsequently brought stability to the banking system. However, the picture isn't as rosy when it comes to global debt, which hit a record level in the first quarter of 2017. Data from the Institute of International Finance showed that global debt reached $217 trillion in the first quarter, which is equivalent to 327% of global GDP. On top of this, emerging market debt also rose 5 percentage points in the first quarter from a year ago. China poses the biggest risk, with households accelerating their borrowing, with its total debt surpassing 304% of GDP as of May 2017. With rising debt levels, is a global economy really safe from a financial crisis?
And to tell us more about this, we have Professor Kim Se-wan from Ewha Women's University joining us in the studio today. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so as we just heard in the report, global debt has reached $217 trillion in the first quarter of this year, which is triple the world GDP. Now, is this a ticking time bomb?
Well, that is a really tough question because we do not have yet a definite answer to the right size of the debt in the country level. I would rather say that $217 trillion of the global debt is okay if global economy maintains over 3% of the economic growth on average. I think that is a minimum economic growth to generate the cash to pay interest and principal together.
Now, concerns are also growing over China's total debt, which surpassed 300% of GDP. Now, how much of a risk does this pose to China's economy as well as its financial market?
Last year, we saw the collapse of the China stock market like 40% in 2 months. So that is mostly related to the huge size of China's corporations and household debt. And still, the fears and risk of the Chinese debt is continuous, and therefore, there is a possibility of downturns of the Chinese economy and Chinese financial market together. The one thing very interesting is Chinese central bank has totally different views on this. According to Chinese central bank, they are saying that the measurement of the China's debt by foreigners is totally incorrect.
Okay.
So therefore, according to their estimate, their debt is only 40% of the GDP, not the 300% of the GDP. So they are willing to provide more loans to private sector.
Well, that's quite a big difference.
Exactly.
There. All right. Well, experts say the debt burden is not distributed evenly, with European countries in the midst of deleveraging, while some emerging markets are actually building up very high debt levels.
Well, it is true that the accumulation of the debt is more skewed to developing countries or emerging markets. But that could be another, I believe, source of financial crisis because today the developed countries and emerging markets, financial markets are highly intertwined. So as we saw from European case in the past, the relatively less developed countries' financial crisis in Italy and Greece directly affects the financial troubles in developed countries like UK, Germany, and France.
Now, as you just heard in the report, U.S. Fed Chair Janet Yellen has said that banks are very much stronger now, and also we're not really likely to see a financial crisis within our lifetime. Or do you agree with this?
Well, I believe her speech only applies to developed countries' commercial banking system like U.S. and Eurozones, Japan, and Korea. So since financial crisis of 2008, central banks and BIS, which is Banks of International Settlement together, intensified the size of the safe asset by raising particularly capital adequacy ratio up to 8%. That was previously only 5%. So because of that, financial market and banking system became safer place to before. However, that requirements was not enforced to some emerging markets like China and Russia.
All right. Now, the IIF warned that there's over $1.9 trillion worth of emerging market bonds and syndicated loans that are due to mature by the end of this year. And also, redemptions in U.S. dollars make up about 15% of the total. So with that in mind, what impact will further U.S. rate hikes have on emerging markets?
Well, most of $1.9 trillion of the debt to emerging markets will be rolled over by extending the loan periods.
Okay.
And since, however, U.S. interest rate is going up and therefore U.S. dollar is appreciating, the burden of the emerging market will be increased. And related to that, another important point is the funds invested in emerging markets, stock market, will be easily getting out of the market. So if that happens in a larger scale, that's going to be another risk factor to emerging markets.
Then what's your outlook on the global financial market, and should we not have to worry about another financial crisis on the horizon, like Janet Yellen said?
Well, it is true that financial market and banking system became safer place thanks to their hard working in organizing the safety net between banking systems. And it is also true that global economy is entering the recovery phase led by US, Japan, and Eurozones. So I don't think there will be another financial crisis in the next several years. But in the long run, it is extremely difficult to forecast or predict the financial crisis because it is really a random phenomenon. So it is important to be careful and building a better system.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you very much.
The nation's longest holiday weekend this year may end up lasting a little bit longer. In a radio interview earlier today, Kim Jin-pyo, the chair of President Moon's Policy Advisory Committee, said he's pushing for measures to designate Monday, October 2nd, as a temporary holiday. Dubbed the Golden Holiday, this year's 7-day holiday kicks off on National Foundation Day on the 3rd of October, followed by the Chuseok holiday and Hangul Day. Now, if the move is approved, it would create a 10-day holiday, including the weekends on both sides. Kim added the measure would be a great vacation opportunity for residents who are often overworked while boosting domestic consumption. The government expects higher demand for electricity this summer compared to last year, and it has vowed to ensure a stable power supply. Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon said with an increased number of generators nationwide, the country will be able to provide up to 97,000 megawatts of electricity. He says that's enough to cope with rising demand, which is expected to peak at around 86,500 megawatts, up about 1,300 megawatts from last year. Korea relies mostly on nuclear and fossil fuel for its energy needs, but the new Moon Jae-in administration aims to increase the usage of clean, renewable sources in the coming years. And as the heat wave continues, the cooling products have been jumping into action. Items like personal fans and cooling gel cushions have been making their footprints in the market. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
In this hot office worker Min Jae-won has a unique item underneath her desk. When she puts her feet on the board, a cool breeze blows and relieves discomfort from sweaty feet. Where she sits, she has a specially designed cushion that keeps her cool during the long working hours.
I can use them at home and the office, and it doesn't add to my energy bill.
She also has a new type of cooling fan that uses frozen packs of gel to cool warm air as it passes through the chamber, blowing refreshing air towards the user. As the weather gets even hotter, sales of new products like these are steadily increasing. Portable fans have now become common sight in a growing variety of different styles and designs.
Recently, with the heat wave persisting, sales of personal cooling items have more than doubled.
Major fashion brands like Eland has also taken popular motifs from long-beloved ice cream products, using them to create new designs.
I think it's cute and fun that my favorite ice cream is on a t-shirt. I was looking to buy one for my boyfriend.
Fun and practical. As the heat wave continues, unique products are being released to help us forget the hot summer weather. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Ransomware cyber attacks targeting companies and organizations have been spreading worldwide. And beyond the financial threats posed, the malware is now becoming an issue of national security. Let's take a closer look.
Ransomware cyber attacks are causing turmoil. The virus spreads to computers, encrypts all of the files, and demands payment from the affected users. The malicious software is posing a growing threat to the world as it continues changing into new forms. This property management office has been affected by a ransomware attack. The company, which earns much of its revenues from online advertising, was infected with the malware last month.
기존의 사이트는 광고를 띄워가지고 그걸 보시고 이제 손님들이 이제 전화 문의나 그리고 이제 상담 문의가 계속 지속적으로 왔었는데 지금 그 랜섬웨어 라야나 랜섬웨어 걸려가지고 한 3주 정도 동안은 이제 거의 전화 통화를 거의 못 받은 상태예요.
This web hosting company, which provides servers, was infected by the virus as well and suffered damages worth roughly $9,000.
If my website is not restored, the losses will amount to $13,000, including the cost of developing the website, time-related costs, and restoration fees.
First becoming widely known in 2005, ransomware went global in 2013, spreading across North America and Europe. Last year alone, more than 600 million ransomware attacks were reported worldwide, and they're becoming more frequent. The most recent Petya ransomware attack originated from Russia. The virus affected major institutions, such as the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine and even a state-owned bank.
We have anonymous cyber foes, often sponsored by state or non-state entities.
As opposed to targeting random individuals like in the past, ransomwares have been attacking business firms since last year and have caused serious damage. Last May, the so-called WannaCry ransomware hit major Korean firms and institutions. 4,000 computers in 50 facilities, including general hospitals, IT service companies, and movie theaters, were affected by the virus. This web hosting company suffered damages worth over $1 million from the ransomware cyber attack. Among 300 servers used to run websites, 153 of them were affected in less than 2 minutes. Homepages of over 3,000 organizations managed by this company were completely shut down. The company struggled to restore its data and ended up paying a ransom of $1 million worth of bitcoins to the hackers.
The system manager has been running backups on PCs, but the process may have been detrimental to security, which is why the damage was severe.
Nearly half of the total damage from ransomware attacks comes from small and medium-sized firms. They are at high risk since these firms tend not to invest in improved security system.
Unfortunately, small and medium-sized firms frequently fall victim to malware. Their system contains a lot of sensitive information necessary for the firm's operations. But to save costs, many of them are backing up data carelessly and have lax security protocols.
The reason behind the rapid rise of ransomware stems from the anonymous virtual currency known as Bitcoin. Since you cannot track down who the owner is, many hackers are demanding them as payment. Major international companies worldwide are now joining together, offering free ransomware restoration programs and tips to prevent the malware spread. The state-run Korea Internet and Security Agency has also stepped as well. They have strengthened measures to block ransomware, which often comes from overseas.
We will collect information on the locations where the malware has spread from, to block them completely before they hit Korean shores. We will run a team specializing in ransomware management starting in July.
The Korean government recently opened a special hotline for those affected by ransomware. It is comprised of cybersecurity experts from various firms and institutions. They will disseminate emergency alerts and operate a nationwide promotion channel to raise awareness.
With help from the private sector, the Ministry of Science, IT, and Future Planning will continue to strengthen preventative measures for vulnerable software, tighten its monitoring system on the distribution of malware, and share useful information on cybersecurity risks.
It is essential to back up your data by using offline tools such as an external hard drive. Also, try to update your computer immediately when you see update notices pop up. If you remember to do these two things, you can significantly reduce your risk of being attacked by ransomware.
Cyber attacks are growing in frequency worldwide. It is crucial for us to be well prepared for the battle emerging in cyberspace by raising security awareness and strengthening our policies.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. So don't forget to check back with us then. Thanks for watching and goodbye.